The Senate has approved the request of President Muhammadu Buhari to restructure the 22.7 trillion loans that the Central Bank of Nigeria advanced to the federal government under its Ways and Means and policy. The Ways and Means provision allows the government to borrow from the Apex Bank if it needs short-term or emergency finance to fund delayed government expected cash receipts of fiscal deficits. The Buhari government said it saw the loans when the country started experiencing a significant shortfall in revenue. Last year, the Senate rejected Buhari's request to approve the 22.7 trillion naira Ways and Means advance on the ground that it lacked details. With the Buhari administration coming to an end in less than 25 days, why the sudden approval by the Senate? Joining us on this show this morning to discuss the Senate's approval of Buhari's 22.7 trillion Ways and Means loan request is Tilewa Adebajo, Chief Executive Officer of the CFG Advisory. Welcome to the morning show, Tilewa Adebajo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Ayo.
Morning.
Good morning, Ruben, and good morning, Rufai.
Well, quickly, this is about the third time we're discussing this matter with you. You've been on this program before to say that, look, the Ways and Means going beyond the 5% threshold is in fact a violation of the CBN Act. You've written an opinion and you've made suggestions to the National Assembly, and now here we are. The National Assembly, it's not just the Senate, the House of Representatives yesterday told the same part as the Senate, saying that, look, the federal government of Nigeria can go ahead and restructure the Ways and Means, can securitize the Ways and Means that had been acquired. So what do you feel? How do you feel? Do you feel like, oh, these lawmakers, they don't listen? And the question that was raised, why now? Just when the Buhari administration is about to depart.
Thank you very much, Ruben, for the question. I think your lead is a bit deceiving in the sense that the first question we need to ask yourself is, does the Senate have the authority to approve Ways and Means? That's the first question. The second question is that if they do, which are the laws that gives them that authority to approve Ways and Means? Like I said, I think you've said it's the third time we're talking about this. So I think I'm beginning to reach the limits of my expertise on this subject. And I think maybe we need to start looking at the legal implications of what this whole Ways and Means financing is, because I do not want to talk about the Ways and Means, if we're going to drag this and we're not making progress. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, the CBN Act was passed by the same legislators in 2007. The Debt Management Office was set up by an act of the same Senate and the legislators in 2003. And in setting up the CBN Act of 2007, which was an updated version of the CBN Act of 2002, the legislators made it quite clear when they passed that law that the revenue in Section 38, that the revenues should not exceed 5% of the previous year's revenue. The previous year's revenue for the government was about 10 trillion naira. So 5% of that is about, 10% of that is 1 trillion, and 5% of that is 500 billion. So if the law says that the Ways and Means financing cannot exceed 500 billion, the first question we need to ask is, how come it's at 23.7 billion? So that question needs to be answered. How did the CBN exceed that limit? So that's the question we need to ask. Then where is the Attorney General in this whole matter? Why will the President go to the Senate to seek approval to securitize Ways and Means when the law is very clear on the limits to that? Now, if we were talking about the doctrine of necessity, maybe during the COVID global pandemic, you can go to the National Assembly and seek an amendment of both the CBN Act and the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So when you come and say that the Senate has approved the Ways and Means financing, your headline story is misleading. You should have investigated and asked yourself, does the Senate have the authority to approve Ways and Means in violation of Section 38 of the CBN Act? Now, the Debt Management Office, for the first time, came up with a statement on the 4th of May. If you check it on their website, talking about the Ways and Means. They put out something called Frequently Asked Questions, which gave us for the first time an insight into the way they're thinking. What they're saying is that, first of all, we now got clarity on the interest rates on the Ways and Means was 20%. So what they're saying is that they're going to issue bonds, and they're not going to issue these bonds to the public, but they're going to issue the bonds to the central bank in violation of Section 38. Now, the central bank cannot collect repayment from the government in forms of securities. That is clearly stated. So, and they are now saying in that same statement that there is a statutory requirement that allows them to go to the Senate and the House of Reps for approval to refinance Ways and Means. So there's a contradiction between the Debt Management Office statement and that of the CBN Act. So I read the CBN Act again last night, and I read the DMO Act, and I can't find anything that says that securitization can go to the National Assembly for approval. So right now, like I've told you, I've reached the limit of my expertise. So what we need to do now is, the only thing I know is that the Debt Management Office has the capacity to set up a technical committee made up of private sector and public sector people to review something, and they haven't done that. So right now, what I can tell you is that we have a problem in Nigeria. The government is insolvent. They have their backs against the wall, and they're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. So the only thing that I know from my own expertise is that if they want to do this, they have to amend the CBN Act. So that is where we are today.
Okay, so from what I hear you, Mr. Adebajo, the Senate or the House has put the cart before the horse. So what they ought to have done was to have amended the CBN Act to give them a legal framework to be able to pass the Ways and Means request or honor the Ways and Means request of the federal government. But it's been done, you know, and we have talked about, we have talked about the legality or the illegality of it a number of times, even before the Senate, you know, like if I put it Nicodemously, passed it. But I'd like you to examine what the Senate President said with regards to their justification for passing this request. What he had said was that, number one, Ways and Means is global practice, which I don't think anybody would go against that. It's just the process and the legality of it that we are challenging. Number two, he said that, according to what the president had mentioned, if they hadn't done this, they would have had to pay a higher debt of about 1.8 trillion naira in the next year. And that was what they were trying to avoid. They had a revenue shortfall, they had no other option, and so their hands were sort of forced. They had to do it because there was nothing else they could do. We've talked about options on this show a number of times in terms of what else could they have done. I know you're eager to respond, but you know, we talked about options. What were their hands tied? Were there other things they could explore at this dying minute?
No, you see, Ayo, the reason why I'm anxious to respond is that I do not accept that, okay? You do not manage the Federation account on speculation, or you did not know, or I did not know. The Federation account is an account of 20 trillion budget every year. So it requires serious professional management. You cannot tell me that Ways and Means is, you have your laws of the country. So don't let us go into global issues You know, if during the global pandemic you wanted to amend the Central Bank Act and the Fiscal Responsibility Act because of the pandemic, you could have amended the act. So please, I don't buy that. In fact, I would like your producers to put up the slide on the pressure on government on public spending, which was put out by the World Bank late last year. If you take a look at this slide, we talk about the pressure on the public finances is not something that is new. It's not today that it started. It started way back in 2015. If you take a look at this slide, you talk about public finances are under pressure. This is something that was published by the World Bank last December. On the right-hand side of the slide, you will see a red line which talks about the 5% threshold that the government should not exceed. Now, from 2015, the government has been exceeding this threshold. And if you see that chart, you can see that every year they just pull this thing up. And you can see that that thing has gone from what should not be 500 billion to as much as 23.7 trillion. So this is not something that is new. It's something that has been going on for 7 years. So when you now come back and tell me now that your hands were not tied. You knew that this was illegal for 7 years, but you continue to ignore it. So you are going to get to a stage whereby you now increase salaries in April, and you can no longer fund your budgets, but you do not want to remove the subsidy. You cannot have it all. So I do not buy that excuse. And then you also have to follow the law. You cannot, if I'm a Nigerian and I'm sitting here and you're telling me that we're going to break the law because we have no choice but to break the law, that's not true. You could have amended the Fiscal Responsibility Act. You could have amended the CBN Act. Not approve an illegality. How can the senators approve an illegality? Does that make it right? And you are sitting here in the studios, you are getting the headline, oh, the Senate has finally approved this, as if it is right. Like I've told you, I've exceeded the limit of my expertise. Get the lawyers in and let them tell you. But from what I see, from what I understand on ground, there's a lot of contradictions.
Okay, so Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, we've gotten to the point now. So the question is, who is going to sue? Can you sue as a Nigerian? Can anybody sue? Because once illegality continues, we gradually build a pariah state. And what this has shown is that anybody can mismanage, violate financial laws, and get away with it without recourse to any consequences. And this is already a template for chaos and disaster going forward. So the first question is, who is going to sue? Also, let us break down the implication. No, hang on a minute. Let us break down the implication of what they have done. They've pushed this now to the CBN for 40 years at the rate of 9%. Can you give us a blow-by-blow yearly analysis of the impact on the books of the CBN that, when you look at the account of the CBN in the first place, there are a lot of talks about the account in the first place. And what will that do to the general output of Nigeria with parameters like inflation and running the country in general? So let's even go to the nitty-gritty of what they did. 40 years, 9%. Let's break all of that down. And who should sue as we speak? And who should we sue?
Okay. Thank you very much, Rufai. Like I said, I think I'm reaching the limits of my own expertise. But in terms of the laws, both the CBN and the Debt Management Office can sue and be sued. So, they can be sued on this matter and they can take that to court. So the provisions are there in the law that they can be sued for violating their own acts. That's number one. Number two, you see, when I read a law, and Section 38 is very clear that certain CBN should not hold ways and means securities on its balance sheet. It is not something that I can fathom because as far as I see it, the laws have told me that it's a no-go area. You are now telling me to consider that. But there are certain things that you look at in terms of capital adequacy ratios, which you use to judge the health of any bank or banking system. Now, the CBN has, I've not seen their accounts, by the way, so I don't know what their current paid-up share capital is. But by the 2007 CBN Act, it's supposed to be 100 billion. So now you have 100 billion authorized share capital, and you have leveraged a loan of 23.7 trillion. Now, what is the capital adequacy ratios in terms of providing for that? And what is the integrity of the central bank balance sheet? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves. I don't know because I haven't seen their accounts to be able to understand what their position is. But the question is, yes, we said it's been done and they've done it, and so what's going to happen? It's not even what's going to happen. The fact is that the salary increase that went in this month, how are they financing the current budget? We have an 11 trillion deficit this year. So you tell me now, how is the Nigerian government running as we speak today? Where are the revenues coming from? And how are they going to finance their projected 11 trillion deficit? That is still something that has not been answered. So there are many complications that we see. So, and like I said, it's like if you do not have rules, if you do not have laws, then it's difficult to project. Because from what I see now, like we said, the bonds are not coming to the public. It's going to be held by CBN. From what DMO has said here is there. So you also need to go back to DMO to get some clarity to tell them which statutory laws gives the National Assembly powers to approve ways and means. I don't know the ones, so maybe they can explain it. But right now, these are all the things that are causing the misalignment between monetary policy is no longer effective, ways and means financing is causing inflation, as with food inflation also. So there's misalignment between monetary policy, fiscal policy, trade and investment policy. So this is where we find ourselves right now. And there are lots of questions that you need to go to the authorities, the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Debt Management Office, the Attorney General. I think you need to go and talk to them and let them give us clarity on these issues.
Well, hopefully the incoming administration will unpack many of these, issues. Hopefully. Thank you very much, Tilewa Adebajo, CEO, CFG Advisory, for joining us on the Money Show.